All right. Thanks for joining me, guys. Sunday night. Let's talk about justice a little bit here. Um, so last night I talked about the letter that I wrote at the very, very beginning of all this, and I wanted to recite that to you last night, but I kind of ran out of steam. But guys, when I go out on these tours, this is like the fourth time that I've been out on a tour, and within the first 2 weeks, well, right at the very beginning, I always get this cold, and I end up coughing, and I lose my voice toward the middle or the end of the tour, and I swear I don't know what it is, but you know, that devil doesn't want me talking, and he does everything he can when I'm out here doing this to keep me from talking. We did a lot of talking today, though. There's a lot of phone calls that were made, and you know, I'm pretty optimistic about where we're going with this. You know, the good news is that everybody can see that we're right, and so, you know, if we're right, then why are we still debating this? Like what's necessary to win, other than them just agreeing to hear it when we already know what the outcome is going to be if they do hear it. But that's why the battle's not fought with the court. The battle's fought in the opinion of the public. You know, and when I made the decision that I was no longer going to go into the courtrooms and, you know, play within their battlefield and by their rules that they don't follow themselves, and instead of asking criminals to continue to stop committing crimes, which they don't because they're criminals, then, you know, I knew that we had to do this a different way. And so, you know, you guys keep asking about motions and these other things that you would file in the court, and I mean, we're not dealing with the court. If we continue dealing with the court, it's going to be the same outcome that we're seeing, because that's where they win, guys. And so if you want to win, you got to find a different place to fight them, a different way to fight them. You don't want to fight them through their motions and fight them through their, you know, their paperwork, because, you know, honestly, like there's 50 million lawsuits that are filed here in America every single year. And how many of those do you think that are decided based upon equity, right? And not based upon who has the larger, you know, a law firm and with greater resources and more networking capability? I mean, you know, it's the decision's already made, and it's made for whoever is wealthier party. And so when you're against the state, and the state wants to enslave you, then obviously you're not going to win. So fighting them in their battlefield is that's not a smart move. It's not a place that you're gonna be able to do it. But a lot of people are asking me, they're like, well, yeah, but if I don't go into their courtroom, then they're going to issue a warrant. And I don't have an answer as far as what you should do. I know what I should do, and I know that if I'm going to claim to be free, then I better be acting like I'm free. And it's not acting like you're free when you're, you know, subjecting yourself to them and walking in because they ordered you to come in out of their power and threats. Guys, if they don't have the jurisdiction to be able to be a court on the matter, because they don't have subject matter jurisdiction or personal jurisdiction to oversee that particular case, then they can't order you in lawfully. And it is lawful to disobey an unlawful order. You don't have to follow anybody's order. If it's not a lawful order, you don't have to go in. So yeah, I mean, you can decline the contract, you can do those things, but you're still operating within their system. You see, what pisses off a narcissist more than anything is ignoring them. They hate that, right? So, you know, I've talked a lot about narcissism. You guys got to remember, like, that's what I did in the military. That's what I did, you know, in intelligence. I'm a human lie detector, and I've been trained to be able to identify liars and their behavior and you know, combat them. And so we know that everybody in that courtroom is a liar, because we know every single one of them taking an oath and they're failing to fulfill that oath. And that's the effect of failing to fulfill an oath, is that you commit the crime of perjury, and perjury is you're a liar. And so we know what they are. We know a judge is a liar. Every single one of them, whether they know it inherently, they are, and as a result, that's what they are. So if we know that they're a liar, then and we know that they're a narcissist, because remember, this is all about the mask that they wear. right? They go around in public and they talk about how amazing they are, honorable they are, and how everybody should just bow to them because they know the law so well. And yet we've now proven that they don't know the law at all because they've never followed the law, right? That's not an expert in law, that's a criminal. But so we've proven that they're not an expert in law. We've proven that they're not honorable by any stretch because honorable men honor the law. They refuse to honor the law, every single one of them. So, they're liars and they have this mask and they don't want the public to realize what they really are. And I don't blame the Supreme Court for, being scared of what we have going on here. I don't blame them because the truth is that the American public is going to realize and understand that this institution, its entire existence, has been undermining the Union and undermining the Constitution because the Union creates peace and harmony amongst all these regional governments. It creates an absence of conflict. But conflict creates crime, and crime creates criminals, and criminals make them their institution a lot of money. So they don't want the Union. They don't want peaceful existence among all the regional governments. So they've been undermining that, putting in place, rulings such as states' rights, where states don't have rights because people have rights, or that states are able to be sovereign and govern their people however they see fit, thus creating disharmony amongst the nation. That's what they were brought in to do. That's what they've been doing their entire existence. And they're undermining the Constitution because if the Constitution got its way, they would all be out of a job because the Constitution has declared all men to be free, and yet they're declaring that all men are to be enslaved and imprisoned, right? So they're not for the Constitution. They're not for the Union because that's inconsistent with their business model. But the American public is going to come to understand this, that for 243 years, they have failed to do what their institution was created to do. That all crime is actually coming from them. That they increase the violence through their rulings and through their other actions. Everybody knows that you go to prison not to become a better person, but to become a better criminal. Because it's not a place where you learn, morality or how to be a better person or how to, better fit into society. It's a place that you go so that they will put you through these horrible tactics that's going to cause fear and conflict. And as a result, you're going to become the very object that they say that you are so that they can go out and fight against you again in this war on crime. And so they're creating these monsters, these aberrant people. And they do it through these institutions that they put them into. When you first get brought into this system, it's so inconsistent with what anybody would expect it to be. Because, we've all been told about American principles and that here in America, innocence doesn't suffer. And here in America, you get a fair process and you can, go in front of a fair judge and a neutral proceeding and a jury and all these things that we're told that we have, that the laws actually uphold and obligate, but they're not being employed. And so once you get into the system, you realize it's so much different than what you expected, that you're in a completely different place, in a completely different world. And now, now not only are you not being given the opportunity to defend yourself or to come in front of a fair and neutral proceeding, but you're put into an institution here that is literally telling you that you're going to be here for, years and years and years based upon, an absence of even investigation. So the system, when they bring you into jail, right? There's these deprivation tactics that they use, and I've talked about them a lot. And these deprivation tactics were somewhat perfected during Guantanamo Bay and Camp X-Ray. But what we learned in Camp X-Ray was that most of the people that were sent there, they weren't terrorists when they got there. But because of these deprivation tactics that we put them through that messed with them physically, sexually, emotionally, they actually became a terrorist when they left because of the trauma we put them through. And so we were creating these terrorists in order to go out and justify this war on terror. The CIA was doing that. And we perfected those tactics during that time, and now those tactics are used in every single jail and prison across the country here in America. When you have the hardened walls, right? You have the absence of freedom. You have the fear of not knowing when you're going to get out. You have the fear of uncertainty in your family and social life. You're not able to contact your loved ones. You've got officers with guards. You've got a high tension, high conflict environment. You've got them actually, inciting violence as well. The food, where you're constantly thinking about where your next meal is going to come from because they don't give you as much as you would need to be able to feel as though you're full. They're all just tactics that are used to, puts you into a place where that fear will actually change what you are, and how you act. And so, you may be a law-abiding citizen, and then all of a sudden the police come and pick you up and arrest you. You go to jail, and you're like, oh my God, this is what I thought. And then you get out, and the moment you get out, you're going to act erratic. You're going to act, scared. You're not going to come in and respond to them because of that fear. And so then they look at you and they say, see, look, he's he's crazy, or look, he's he is a criminal because he's not coming in and responding to the next hearing. So they create this so that they can make you into the object that they say that you are. The system creates these people because of the tactics they use, and it's wrong because that's not the person that they're meant to be. It's once again using duress to bring about a desired result. It's using fear, and that's again terrorism, just as I said yesterday, because terrorism is the use or threat of use of fear in order to bring about a desired result from one organization to another organization. So when you use fear or the threat of fear in order to get someone to do something, that's terrorism. That's what it is. So again, like if the court lacks the authority to be able to call you in, and they summons you into a warrant or a summons, that summons is invalid. I mean, I don't respond to anything. I haven't been arrested in a while, but even when I was arrested, I haven't do not detain now. But when I was arrested, they'd only keep me for a day before they wanted me out of there because I'm talking and telling people what to do. I mean, that's the best place for me to be if I'm going to overcome the system. Unfortunately, this is a system that you break from within. And that's why I say that this case was already won. It was won in 2019. It's just that the system has not yet conceded, but they will. So if we go into the courtroom, then we're fighting on our own. We're fighting by ourselves. We're fighting against them. And it's kind of like David and Goliath. You're not trained in this particular type of battle, and so yeah, it's scary because you're not getting the support that you need. Your defense attorney is, not helpful because he works for the state. He's an administrative officer of the state. So his first duty is to protect the judicial machinery, not to get you, out of your, allegations, because these attorneys are supposed to be part of the executive branch, right? That's why an attorney general, right? They're supposed to be part of the executive branch. But that's not the way they work when they are an administrative officer of the court. Because as an administrative officer of the court, you got to understand, again, what administrative law is. Administrative law is law that is created by the administrative branch. The administrative branch is the judicial branch. So the judicial branch is there to administer the law. That's their purpose, administer the law. So when the judicial branch makes rulings, right, a judge made ruling, and then they call it law, that would be case law or administrative law. So that's why attorneys, always cite case law, right? That's why they don't go to the Constitution, they go to case law, because that's what they were trained to do. They were trained to use judge-made rulings. They were trained to follow judges. And so then you wonder why they just bow down to judges. It's because that's what they're trained to do. They're administrative officers of the court. So that's also the reason why I say that a lot of you, I would say, weigh the risk here, right? Because some of you may still be on the fence with me. And I get that, right? I totally understand. And maybe you don't want to go my way. Maybe you don't want, but that's not going to change the outcome, right? I've got the case. I've got the work done. The service is finished. All the heavy lifting is over. And now we're at the point where it's nothing more than a matter of bringing to light what was completed, so that we can force the court to hear it. But I'm not going to go to the court until we're in a situation where the court is not going to have a choice, because I'm not going and asking them to hear a case. I'm not appealing anything because there's nothing to appeal. I'm invoking Article 3 and telling them you must hear it because you have an obligation to do so. You see, we all have the right to be heard by the United States Supreme Court. We have the right to be heard by the United States Supreme Court because the Constitution of the United States has established the obligation for the court to hear it. So if the Constitution says in all cases in which a state shall be party, the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction, such as it does in Article 3, then that means that if a state is named a party, doesn't matter if it's petitioner or respondent. Remember, Chisholm versus Georgia, 1793. Doesn't matter whether they're petitioner or respondent. If a state is named a party, the United States Supreme Court is the only court that has jurisdiction to oversee those parties involved in that dispute. Because the state can't be judging its own case, nor can any other state be judging of another state. The only court that can do that is the United States Supreme Court. So if the state wants to bring an accusation against you through one of its agents, the state cannot be the judge. It has to recuse itself. That's why the Judicial Recusal Code, the Automatic Recusal Code says that. That's why, Alexander Hamilton said it in Federalist 80. That's why James Madison said it in Federalist number 10. That's why John Jay said it in Martin versus Hunter's Lessee. Because the state cannot be both accuser and judge in the same cause. Because if they are, then that would obviously lead to bias, prejudice, and partiality in whatever the outcome is going to be, and then innocence will be suffering, such as they do today. So I can't really answer some of you guys' questions because you want to fight from within their system, and if insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, how many millions of people have tried to fight them from within the system? How many millions of people have tried to fight them with motions to dismiss it? Just knowing that you're right, you can read the law and you're like, oh, I'm going to win this time because the law says it. And then you walk in there and they're like, dismissed, frivolous. It doesn't work. It doesn't work to fight within their own system. That's why Gandhi said it's not the oppressor that needs to hear the truth. They already know it and busy concealing it. It's the oppressed that needs to hear the truth and not the oppressor. You don't need to go into them. They already know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. They're covering this up all right and left. You guys know that. I mean, they scrub the transcripts, mark out words that they say that would implicate them. I mean, they lie on police reports in order to justify the arrest. I mean, guys, they're busy concealing this, right? You're right. They don't care, but the people do. The people do, because the only reason why the judges are able to do what they do is because the people of the United States are permitting them to do what they do. And that's because the people of the United States aren't aware of what they're doing. Because the people of the United States still believes that a judge is, the morally sound and, leader of our country, right? He's a judge, and so therefore he must be completely honest and, whatever. But these people in the United States, they still think that prosecutors are good, honest people, and they're elected in their position because they're fighting crime and keeping all this crime off the streets. When in all reality, the prosecutor, judge are committing more crimes, way more crimes than anyone they're locking up every single day, right? And so, you cannot commit extortion in order to get someone to admit to a theft, because by your criminal act, you're negating and rendering void whatever's occurred. So, government's got to be absolutely above law. If you're going to be law enforcement, and I'm going to speak out to those guys because I used to be, with them. But there's nothing honorable about not obeying the law. And so if you're going to say that you're a peacekeeper, if you're going to say that you're law enforcement, then that means that the enforcement starts with you, right? You cannot break the law in order to enforce the law, ever, right? Because that's just a hypocrite, right? You're not going to sit in judgment of someone else when you yourself are breaking the law. So if you can't obey the law, then how are you going to lead anyone else into obedience of the law? That's why Thomas Jefferson said that when we're reduced to a state of enslavement because they're failing to fulfill their obligations, then we can reclaim our rights and restore our original liberties. Because when government breaches the obligations that they have, based upon the contract that was established that was created by and between the people and their government, when government breaches the terms of their contract in order to enter a new contract to enslave the people or steal their property, then by the breach of the contract, you automatically render void the second. So, if our government is going to be out there killing people with absolute impunity, then you can expect that the people are going to be following that same direction. Guys, up to 1,500 people that our nation has put to death since the death penalty has been reinstated back in 1976. Up to 1,500 people in our nation has put to death. 139 of them have been proven to have been innocent after they were murdered. That's not good. Of the remaining, another 186 have been exonerated after being placed on death row, meaning that they are factually innocent despite being placed on death row. Between those two numbers alone, that is 18% of the people that were on death row were either killed or they were all factually innocent. That's 18%. And those are just the ones we know about because of the evidence that we still have available, DNA or whatever. That number is probably a lot higher than that in all reality. But that's a bad number. That's a terrible number, right? 18% of the people we had in death row actually innocent. And yet the system, just justifies that. The Innocence Project did a movie a number of years ago called The Phantom. And this was about I don't remember his name, but it was a gentleman in Texas, I believe. And there was a murder at a convenience store. Lady was stabbed. The clerk was stabbed a number of times, died. The police got a call, and then they were told that it was this guy in a black sweatshirt, the hood, Mexican guy, I think they said. And so the police drove down the street, and they found some guy in a black sweatshirt and arrested him. And he was saying, I'm innocent. I didn't do anything. And they had other evidence that led to them also saying that he was innocent, but they just continued to push forward. And then they had a whole bunch of people say, oh, it was this other guy. It was not him. It was this other guy over here. Well, long story short, the police just kept going. They went through a trial. They found the guy guilty and put him on death row, and they ended up executing him. Right? They ended up executing him. The whole time he's saying that he's innocent. Well, a number of years later, the Innocence Project comes in with DNA evidence, and they show that this guy didn't do it. And what they found out after investigating this is that the real killer was a police informant. And the police didn't want to give up the informant. So they permitted this guy to go to death because they didn't want to give up their informant. And that's pretty egregious. But what's even more egregious is that the governor of Texas at the time, his apology to the family was that jury made the right decision with the evidence that they had. That's not an apology. That's bullshit, right? The jury made the right decision based upon the evidence that they had. That's not, I'm sorry that your fucking child or brother was murdered, but hey, you know what? I know that we fucking withheld evidence. I know that my police, but you know what? The jury made the right decision. That's not a good statement. But that's what these guys do. By saying that, then he's limiting his liability. But that's not an apology. That's not accepting responsibility for this. And then who was held accountable for this shit, right? You see, as I've said before, when you deal with the Supreme Court, you have 9 justices on that Supreme Court. Those 9 justices represent a body of men. It's known as the Supreme Court. So if one of those justices admit crimes being committed, then that would mean that all of the justices admit crime has been committed, right? So like when we talk about Justice Gorsuch and his book Overruled, if you guys haven't read it, I would highly recommend that you do. Take a little bit of time and go read it, because he makes a lot of incriminating statements within it. One of the statements is within the CPS section, the Child Protective Services. He said that CPS is threatening and intimidating parents to give up their children. Threatening and intimidating parents. That's a very, very key word. You guys remember, threaten and intimidate. When you read that has very, very important connotation when it comes to law. But then the second part is in the criminal section, when he says that prosecutors are threatening and intimidating defendants in order to get them to plead guilty. The reason why I say that is because threaten and intimidate is the very definition of compel. So if you compel someone, what you're doing is you're compelling someone to or you bring about a result through the use of threats or intimidation. So if you get someone to do what you want them to do based upon threats or intimidation, you are compelling them. It's compel. And that's important because the Fifth Amendment self-incrimination clause says that no state, no person shall be compelled in any criminal case to act as a witness against themselves. Okay? No person shall be compelled in any criminal case to act as a witness against themselves. So, with these plea bargains, what's happening is that someone's bringing you in, they're locking you up, they're depriving you of your liberty, they're saying to you, if you don't plead guilty, we're going to send you to prison for 20 years, or if you don't plead guilty, we're going to give you these other charges, or if you don't plead guilty and we take you to trial, you're going to get the maximum penalty. What they're doing is they're threatening you, right, to get you to sign a plea bargain, to enter into agreement of guilt. But where it comes into play with the Constitution is that when you sign a plea bargain, down at the bottom of that plea bargain, it says, I did certain things, and you sign it, meaning that you are acting as a witness against yourself. In fact, you're the only witness, and the way that they get you to do it is through the use of threats or intimidation, a direct violation of the self-incrimination clause. And that includes not just felonies, but misdemeanors as well, because it says no person shall be compelled in any criminal case to act as witness against themselves. Now, where you're going to have a problem with this argument, and we're going to litigate this at Supreme Court, easily, right? Because the trial of all crimes are supposed to be done by jury, according to Article 3. There's no other way to do it except for impeachment, and you guys aren't in trial for impeachment. So, the trial of all crimes, with the exception of impeachment, shall be by jury. There's no other way to adjudicate a crime other than impeachment than a jury, because that's what the Constitution says. But you guys aren't going to litigate that. We're going to do it. But where you get into a problem here is that they say, oh, that wasn't a threat, right? When the prosecutor says to you, if you don't plead guilty, I'm going to give you these other charges, right? And you say, well, that's a threat. He says, oh, no, that's not a threat. That's negotiation. Okay, well, how do you know whether it's a threat? Do you get to make that decision for me? Can you see the threat? Is it like a scratch on my arm? Are you going to ask me to show you my threat, right? Are you going to show you my intimidation? No, because that's an inward manifestation, not an outward. Only you can know if you've been intimidated. Only you can know if you've been threatened. And they can't tell you haven't, right? They can't tell you. So if you walk in court and you say, Judge, I've been intimidated, right? Witness intimidation, witness tampering. Because remember, witness tampering goes both ways. If you tamper with witness, then or tamper with witness through threats, intimidation, to get them not to testify or bring evidence to an existing legal proceeding, then guess what, man? You just fucking committed a felony, and it doesn't matter who you are. Think about it like this: if you're the defendant, right? You're the accused. If you were to call up the accuser and say, "I will shoot you if you come and testify," you're going to go to prison for witness intimidation, tampering, right? So how is it then that the prosecutor can call you up and say, I will send you to prison for 20 years if you come in and testify? Because it's the same thing, right? There's witnesses on both sides. And the prosecutor has no right whatsoever to tamper with, intimidate, threaten, to compel, and to prevent the other side of the story from being told. Because that would be tampering with a witness. It would be a substantive law issue. Because every single witness must testify freely, fully, and truthfully to any matter pending before the court. That's the laws of criminal procedure. So when the prosecutor and the state, when the prosecutor and the state, when they represent the accuser, because remember, when someone calls up the police and say that something happened to them, their attorney is the prosecutor. Prosecutor's put in a position to represent them. That is their attorney, their counsel. All right, so they're working on their behalf to go after this person over here. So when an opposing party intentionally prevents the other side from being present to participate in the proceedings, it doesn't matter if that's civil or criminal. If opposing party prevents you from being able to be present through threats or intimidation, that's a crime, right? It doesn't matter whether that attorney is prosecutor or because it still is opposing party. When the state takes a side against you, it's opposing party. As a result, guys, just like I've said numerous times, states cannot be both accuser and judge. If the state takes a side against you, it cannot be presumed to be neutral and biased to act as the judge against you, right? And so that derives from Article 3. Again, Article 3, Section 2. Article 3, Section 2 says, in all cases in which a state shall be party, the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction. Original jurisdiction means that that's the court to act first. No other court in the country can act before the court that has original jurisdiction. That is the court that acts first. So, if that's true, and remember, when it says the Supreme Court, it's not referring to a state Supreme Court, because the state Supreme Courts didn't exist at the time of the establishment of the Constitution. Because we just became a union. There may still be Supreme Courts within the states, perhaps, but they didn't exist before the establishment and ratification of the union, because it was the Constitution that created the nation, and all that the Constitution created was the Supreme Court of the United States. So it wasn't referring to a state Supreme Court. It was referring to the United States Supreme Court. And so again, what it says, that the Supreme Court of the United States shall have original jurisdiction of any case in which the state was a party. So if we want to understand the rationale of the Constitution, or the original intent of the Constitution, from a textualist perspective or an originalist perspective, we would typically go to the drafters and authors of the Constitution. That's what the Supreme Court's going to do, because we have a 6-3 majority for textualist in originalists, 6 of the justices on there will rely upon the original intent of the Constitution, supposedly. So what is the original intent? Well, James Madison is considered the father of the Constitution. He wrote it, he drafted it, he drafted the Bill of Rights, there's no denying all that. So James Madison wrote the Federalist Number 10. Remember, the Federalist Papers was that we were having a hard time getting the Constitution ratified. There were a couple states that were in limbo. I think it was New York was one of the last ones. And we needed to get 1 or 2 more states before we reached the 3/4 and thus ratified and adopted the Constitution. But they were having a hard time getting the states to agree to it because the states wanted to be sovereign. They wanted to maintain their sovereignty. They wanted to be able to govern however they see fit, and they wanted to maintain the Confederacy. They didn't want to move to a union where the states gave up their sovereignty to subject themselves to the central government. They didn't want to do it. So what happened was James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay, they came and they started writing the Federalist Papers. Over a period of time in different newspapers in New York State and around there, they would write a discourse, an editorial argument talking about, the benefits of the Constitution, benefits of moving to a union and not having the Confederacy anymore. And so once they finished the Federalist Papers, obviously, then New York ended up voting on it once again. They adopted it, and thus we became a union. But James Madison, father of the Constitution, he wrote the Federalist Number 10. It was on November 23rd, 1787. The article was titled "The Union as a Safeguard Against Domestic Faction and Insurrection." And in the article, James Madison said, "No man is allowed to be judged in his own cause, because his interest would no doubt bias his judgment and not improbably corrupt his integrity. With equal, nay, with greater reason, a body of men are unfit to be able to judge and party at the same time." So the state is made up of a body of men, right? And that body of men includes prosecutors and law enforcement and CPS and judges. These are all part of the body of men that make up the state. So when the body of men that make up the state bring an accusation against you, then that same body of men cannot be presumed to act as the judge against you. Therefore, no man is allowed to be judged in his own case, because his interest would no doubt bias his judgment and not improbably corrupt his integrity. What James Madison was getting at there was that was the earliest known reference to the modern day concept of conflict of interest, because he was trying to develop this understanding of, you would have a conflict of interest if you work for the plaintiff. The body of men that bring the accusation to the state, then you can't have the state be the judge too. And that's what he was getting at. He wrote about that, Federalist Number 10. That was the earliest known reference to the modern day concept of conflict of interest. When we talk about sovereign immunity, and we're going to destroy sovereign immunity as well, it's a very, very simple pathway to making that happen as well. We're not going to go into that at the moment. But when you look at the Tort Claims Act, which is where sovereignty is waived by government. Normally, you would have to go to government and request permission to sue them, because you have to go to the king and ask the king, and only the king can permit you to sue him or whatever. That's the whole theory of sovereignty, is that the king can do no wrong. So if you have to go to the state and ask for permission to sue them, it's because the state says that they're sovereign and they're the king and they can do whatever they want because the laws come from them, which is not true. Fuck you. But nonetheless, if you go to the Tort Claims Act, again, you guys go out and check this out, okay? Make sure that I'm right. There are certain instances in which government automatically waives sovereignty, and thus you can automatically sue them. One of which is if government takes action in a case or a side in a case. Read it. So if the state takes action in a case, they have waived immunity, because you can't take action in a case and then say I'm immune. How can you say, I don't give you permission to be able to do it because I came against you? If the king steps down and is going to take a side against you, then he's waived immunity because he's in a case against you. So immunity is automatically waived the moment that government takes a side in a case, or takes any action in a case. And thus, a body of men cannot be both judged and accused in the same cause. This is where the theory comes into play, right? I've got a body, this body of Tanawah right here, right? And it has a whole bunch of different parts. I have hands, I have eyes, I have ears, I have legs, and I have all these different parts that make up the body of me. If my hand goes out and it steals something, then my head can't say, it was my hand that did it. You can't punish me. No, part of the same body of men, right? If my foot goes out and assaults someone, my head can't say, my foot didn't do that. because it did. It's one body. So you cannot be both judge and accuser in the same cause, because the body of men that make up the state cannot be presumed to be neutral and biased when they're acting as the accuser, right? To be the judge. And it's a very simple concept. A body of men are unfit to be both judge and party at the same time. So when the state is made up of a body of men, and that body of men includes whoever's accusing you of a crime, remember, the reason why they brought in information was because they had to have something accuse you, because it couldn't be the state accusing you. Because if the officer is accusing you of a crime, the officer represents the state. So California had to find a way to bypass this issue and say, oh, well, we're going to charge you by information, because that officer has information on you, right? And so they bring this information in and they charge you by that. And thus the state is still your accuser, because it's the state that's bringing the accusation, you know? And then they charge you by way of information. But the problem with the information is that if state says we're immune and sovereign because we're charging you, because your accuser is this fucking piece of paper here, right? How can you confront your accusers? Your right to confront your accusers evaporates the moment they charge you by information, because you can't put that information on a stand and cross-examine it. But that information is presented to the court as though it's truth. Because in common law, an affidavit is considered truth. It's truth in law. And an unrebutted accusation is truth. So if the accusation comes in by an affidavit and the officer presents it as though it's truth, right? They say, oh, well, this information is factually truthful and correct. I got it from, this lady over here that said that she got robbed by that guy. And he reduces that information they got for them down in writing and then presents it to the court and says, yep, this is all factual, truthful, and correct. Well, that officer wasn't even a witness, for one. Therefore, we don't know if that's factual or correct, and there's not an oath that's attached to it, because the oath would have to come from the one accusing, not from the officer swear that it's truthful, because his oath doesn't matter. He's not a witness. So we got a Fourth Amendment violation, right off the bat right there. But nonetheless, when he takes that information and he submits it to the court and to the judge and says, Judge, I would like you to issue a warrant for this guy, right? First off, that judge hasn't heard the other half of the story. All he's heard is what the officer says is factual, truthful, and correct. So then the judge is issuing the order for arrest, but he works for the officer, right? And so, what happens here is that an unrebutted accusation is truth. So the moment that they don't give you an opportunity to confront that hearsay evidence that was against you by having a hearing, a grand jury, whatever, and giving you the ability to confront that, then that is considered truth at common law. They presented this as facts. It is factual, and now they can go and order your arrest, and they can take you into jail and hold you there on a pre-investigative detainment. And during that period of time that you're in jail, they will threaten and intimidate you and force you into agreeing to comply with whatever it is that they demand that you comply with, right? And they're going to send you to an institution for however duration of time they want you to be there. And so they will use these tactics in order to put you into that place where they can control you, where they can bring about this fear, and thus make you into the very object that they say that you are. A lot of these people are not violent until they get to jail, right? And then the system says, oh, this guy's violent. This guy's crazy violent, right? But the system, through its tactics, makes this person, frustrated, angry. Like, why is it? And as a result, then his anger causes him to become exactly what they want you to be. And that's important because, as I said before, we do not have to be who they say that we are, but we have to recognize the fact that they're using these tactics to make us become that. So they can call us a criminal, but remember, they can't make us be a criminal. It's up to us. We can become the object that they say we are, or we can figure out a way to deal with it. And so you have to deal with it by knowing these deprivation tactics and countering them. And I don't have any good recommendations on how to do that, because it's not easy. But once you understand that these are tactics that they're using, and you consider what they're saying you are, and you're offended by it, I get it. They say you're violent. You're like, I'm not violent. I don't even. You know who you are. Their words doesn't have to make you do that. But if you get angry about it, right, and you lash out at them, then guess what? You're going to become exactly what they say that you are. And that's unfortunately what's happened to a lot of our people, is that they have been labeled something, and then through that labeling and through the stress and the anger and the lashing out, now they're going to prison for a long period of time, because now they are a violent person, and the system says, well, what they did, I told you. That monster was created. Again, it was created. And so, I had a conversation earlier with a couple people. It was a good conversation, but they still weren't clear about the whole, we're going to let these guys go, right? They just couldn't grasp that again. And I get that. But guys, I am not advocating for the release of dangerous people into society. I'm not advocating. I've never, ever, ever said that we have to release a bunch of dangerous criminals, right? Dangerous people. But what I have said is that if their conviction is unconstitutional, that must be addressed. We cannot permit this government to create the narrative and push the narrative that, we can't do that because all these dangerous people are going to go. Because all that they're trying to do is they're trying to justify their behavior once again, right? They're going to say, we can't let this happen because look at all these dangerous people that are going to get out. No, what you're doing there, government, is once again, you're trying to justify your illegal acts so that you don't have to deal with the fucking problems you created, right? And so when we talk about looking at the end and we say, look at what will happen if he wins his case, I say don't look at what will happen. Look at the issue. Look at the issue. Because we're certainly in a wrong place now. I think everybody would agree that we're in a bad place. We are not where we were meant to be. This is not what was envisioned. This is not what this is not what we expected, and this is not what we need to live with. And for that reason, we can understand that we're in the wrong place right now. We're in the wrong place. We're headed to the wrong destination. But why are we in the wrong place? Why is it? Because we didn't look at the issue back then. Because when it comes to the issue, you have two choices. You can do right or you can do wrong. You can follow the law or not follow the law. If you don't follow the law and you don't do right, then you can expect that you're not going to reach the right outcome, right? So we're in the place we're at today because on the issue, we didn't make the right decision. The Supreme Court decided that they weren't going to follow the law. And so as a result of failing to follow law, they brought us to a place that is different than what we expected to be because they made the wrong decision on the issue. Wrong will always produce wrong. Wrong can never produce right. So in the wrong place, then we're in the wrong place because the decision, the base issue, was wrong, made a number of years ago. So all I can say right now is that if we want to be in a better place, then that would mean that we would need to choose a different destination or choose. And so we can't look at the outcome, and we can't allow them to justify it by saying, if we make this decision, look at all these people that are good. No, system, you did this. I don't care how long it's been done. I don't care how many times you've done. You, government, created this problem. So you, government, don't get to justify the outcome and say, we can't fix this because it's too big. No, you fucking caused this. And now the people are suffering because of the bullshit that you did when you made the wrong decision at the beginning. So when they try to bring us over there and say, look at the end, we're going to say, no, look at the issue. Are we going to make the right decision on this issue? Are we going to follow the law or not? And I think that we want to follow the law because that would be the right decision. And no matter what, I don't know how it's going to look, but if we make the right decision on the issue, then we will reach the right outcome because right will always produce right. So if our laws say that we need to preserve the freedom of the people, right, and that government was instituted to protect life, liberty, and environment to find happiness for the people, then that's what they should be doing. Not looking the other direction and saying, okay, if we don't do it this way, then look at all this chaos. No. You see, the problem today is that they're focused on speed and efficiency, pushing as many people through as they can, putting them into these institutions so that they can justify their criminal behavior. Right, so that they can profit off of their illegal acts. That's the truth. And so, when they say to us that there's no other options. These are aberrant people. These are bad people. We just got to lock up. I'm going to say to them, no, government. Your job is to come up with solutions to societal problems. So if there's a problem with society, then let's come up with a solution. Not just lock them up. Not just take the children from them. We need the best ideas. And government needs to be there to produce those best ideas. And if they can't, if they're incapable of that, then maybe we got the wrong people in, right? I mean, maybe we got people that only care about business and and budgets and all this other bullshit that's associated with a corporation. Maybe they need to get the fuck out of there, right? And we need to bring people in that will deal with the societal problems because that's the purpose of government, is to help build society, to help us live an easier life. And if they can't do that, then they're probably not the right people to have that position. So when they say to us that, if we don't do it this way, look at all the people that are going to get away, or if we don't do it, we don't force plea bargains, then how are we going to adjudicate 1,000 crimes a month, right? Well, no, you're going to prioritize, right? You're not just going to criminalize every single issue because you only have so much budget to be able to prosecute. So if you are currently arresting 1,000 people because that's your quota, right? Because you got to maintain your bed space because your contracts. If that's what you're focused on, then yeah, you may have a problem because you only have the ability to actually take 12 people to trial. You only have that budget. If that's your budget, then that means that you're going to prioritize the 1,000 cases, and you're only going to take 12 of them to trial. Crimes against person, murder, and these other things. The rest of them are aberrant behavior. Aberrant behavior is not criminal behavior, right? Aberrant behavior is an issue of teaching people to do right. It's not an issue of teaching people to act properly or to respect other life. So there's a completely different way of dealing with aberrant behavior as there is dangerous behavior. But the dangerous behavior, even according to the top criminologists in the world, they say that there's only about 4% of our prison population that would be dangerous. Only about 4% that would need to be, taken away and isolated. And even they, though, they were created as well. Because the very, very worst of the worst monsters that our system has, the ones that are hurting lots of people or killing lots of people, they themselves were victims of child abuse that is beyond even the scale that we can even comprehend as child abuse. Those people have had a level of abuse inflicted upon them as a child that we can't even imagine. Right? They have been victims themselves of murders and attempted murders from the very people that they trust, their mothers and their fathers. They've been molested and abused by the people that were supposed to be protecting them. That is the truth. And so even those people, right? Even those people, we can see the reason why they've done the things they've done, because that person was once a child that was hurt, like unfucking believably, right? Unbelievably. And the problem is we never dealt with the hurt of that child because all we can see is the monster that the hurt created. And so, you guys, when we say that there's a better way, Sweden right now is closing down its last prison because Sweden chose to go this route. They chose to go restorative justice. The worst of the offenders in the world, right? They hurt other people because they themselves are hurting, right? Your respect for life, it dictates how you're going to treat life. There's other nations that we can look at as examples for whether or not this would work, and Sweden is a great example. Sweden's a great example because, they now have hardly any recidivism left in Sweden, and so they're shutting down their last prison. If you're a serial killer in Sweden, they come in and they understand that this person had violence committed as a child, and we can look and we can see what happened as a child, and we can see that something tragic happened that has changed the trajectory of their life, and it wasn't their fault. So then we can see why this monster exists, but we want to go and we want to heal that trauma, which is why the issue of morality, right? This issue of justice, what we're trying to do here, it's not a matter of punishment, right? It should never be under the attorney generals. It is a matter of public health, because morality comes from our health, right? Mental health and spiritual health, and that's what dictates whether or not we respect another person's life. So it's well known that the environment that you live in dictates what you learn. So as a child, if my wife and if we create an abusive environment, we will produce abusive children. No doubt about it, right? And then it's my fault that my child is abusive because I showed him to do that. I led him that way. That was my example that I set for him. So I have to take accountability first for what I produce as a child. Now, men, we're the same way. We are a product of the environment we live in. So if our leaders are out embezzling, then why would you expect that we wouldn't do it? We're just following our leaders. We're just doing what they do, right? They need to accept accountability first, because again, when you have a drug task force, right, and they're operating with absolute impunity, and they buy, sell, and manufacture more drugs than any Colombia cartel, right, so that they can create a criminal environment within these institutions, so that the people can actually come in and buy the drugs that they make and sell, and then they're going to arrest them for the drugs that they bought from them. And then they're going to say, oh, well, we're immune, right? Yes. Well, but for your criminal acts, there wouldn't be crime. You created this environment that's now, if it were about good government, then government wouldn't be there trying to create an environment that they can entrap you. No, they'd be coming in and they'd be making an environment where fucking people could be happy, right? They'd be taking the goddamn fences down from around these Section 8 houses, and they'd be bringing the poor into the community and saying, how can we help you, right? Instead of fucking putting them in an institution, spending $65,000 to $80,000 a year to lock them up, right? And throw away the key and then tell everybody they're nothing but a piece of shit drug addict. Right? And instead of doing that, then they might come in and they might just say, you know what can we do to prevent this monster from being created, right? Because if you deal with the trauma, if you deal with the first issue, then the monster goes away. Well known. Sweden is a great example. Israel is a great example. If you are convicted of a crime in the nation of Israel, right, they have a community there called the kibbutza. And in the kibbutza, they have such a low rate of violence. No, not even a single case of homicide ever reported, that if you are convicted of a violent crime in the state of Israel, nation of Israel, then they sentence you to go and live in the kibbutza. You are going to go live there because you're going to learn how to live peacefully amongst peaceful people, right? The environment that you're in dictates what you learn. So if our environment here in America is all about conflict and, suspicion and crime being created by our own government and our public officials, right? That environment is causing us to learn this aberrant behavior. It's causing us to learn these things. And so we have to accept the fact that if government is going to act unlawfully outside of the law, then what they're going to produce is going to be unlawful. So I'm not sticking up. I'm not defending guilty people. I'm not defending criminals. I don't know if they're innocent. I don't know. But that was something that the state was supposed to have determined, and they didn't do it, right? Because they thought that they could do whatever they wanted to do because they were sovereign and immune, right? That's not how it works. So I'm not defending anyone's innocence. I'm not claiming anyone's innocent. That's between them and God at this point, right? But what I can say is that they are not guilty. They're not guilty because guilt is a process, and you must follow that process. And if you do not, there cannot be guilt. Guys, if you know Scripture, 2 Thessalonians says that the man of lawlessness, where there is lawlessness, there cannot be guilt. It says it right in the Bible. So if the government is acting outside of the law, they are lawless. And that would mean that what they produce must also be lawless. Thus, if government breaks the law to secure an outcome, that outcome is void. You cannot break the law in order to enforce the law, right? You cannot do it. So all that we have to do is identify a specific point in the process in which government committed a crime, right? And I don't care who it is, because the body of men that make up the state, if I can point out one criminal act committed by any agent of that body, the whole body must suffer for it. Again, okay, for instance, my body. If my hand goes and steals something, my hand can't say, I can't suffer for it. It was the hand that did it. No, you're part of the same body. My entire body will pay for any criminal act committed by any one of my agents. And when a state takes a side against you, according to the Tort Claims Act, if government takes a side, that government is one entity with a whole bunch of different parts. So if that state is made up of prosecutors and judges and law enforcement and CPS, all you have to do is identify one single crime committed by any one of those agents, and as a result of that one crime, all the agents within the criminal conspiracy must suffer for it, unless the rest of the body steps up and it holds that one accountable for the crimes they commit. And therein lies the criminal conspiracy, right? So yes, government, if an agent of government commits a crime or whatever, then the only thing that they can do is they must hold that agent accountable. And if they don't, then now you have misprision of treason or misprision of felony. They're all implicated in the same criminal act because they're aware of it and they permit it to continue. And this circles back to what I was saying in the very beginning with Justice Gorsuch. When Justice Gorsuch writes a book and he acknowledges the fact that all the judges across the country are all committing crimes, they are all threatening and intimidating people to enter into contracts that are formulated based upon duress, that's an admission in a book that everyone can read by a member of the court. And as a result, that admission makes all of them guilty of the crime. He may not even think that that's an admission yet, but it sure the fuck is. And when you say that prosecutors are threatening and intimidating witnesses to get them to enter into contract of guilt, or you say CPS is threatening or intimidating parents to get them to enter into a contract to give up their children. That word threaten is very important. And that's the exact word that he used in the book, threaten. Because anytime you threaten someone to formulate a contract, that contract is void, right? In contract law, a contract is void if the way in which the contract is formed is illegal, then the contract formed is then illegal. Duress is a justifiable defense for a crime, a breach of contract, or a tort. So if you use duress to formulate a contract is not valid. It is 100% breachable, voidable. And, you know, the example would be is like, if I came and pointed a gun at you, and I said, give me your money or I'll shoot you, what we're doing is we're formulating a contract for your money. I get your money, we formulate a contract, you agree to do it, you give me the money, and I go walk away. Well, that contract's not valid because the way in which we formed that contract was through the use of threats or intimidation, fear. You didn't give me the money because you wanted me to have money because I'm such a great fucking guy. No, you gave me the money because I threatened you, abuse of my power through the gun, right? That is called the crime of robbery. You go to prison for that. So we're formulating a contract through the use of fear because I abused the power that I had to make you enter into that contract. I threatened you to enter into that contract. And therein lies the contract of robbery. But in the contract or the tort of extortion is the same thing. It's bringing about that result through the use of a different type of threat. So instead of using a gun, they're using prison, right? But a threat's still a threat, you know, and intimidation is still intimidation. It doesn't matter whether I'm going to use the power of a gun because that's the power I have, or if I'm a prosecutor and I'm going to use the power of imprisonment, I'm still using my powers abusively to get you to enter into a contract because I'm using threats or intimidation to formulate that contract, thereby making the contract fully voidable. If you enter into contract and agree to sell yourself into slavery because they threatened you, that contract is invalid. It's fucking fully breachable. Because the way in which they formulated a contract was illegal, therefore the contract formed is illegal. Period. So, and again, the judge doesn't get to make the decision on whether or not you've been intimidated. Doesn't get to make that decision. That's not the judge's job. So if you tell a judge, I've been intimidated, and that judge says, oh, no, I don't think you have. What the fuck are you? You're not the fact finder. I am bringing to you a crime that was committed against me, and you must. It's not the judge's. He's not the decision maker. The jury is the decision maker. It's not the judge. He doesn't get to make that decision. So when a judge disregards such an accusation, if you tell a judge, hey, I've been threatened, intimidated by this prosecutor here, they're threatening me every day, right? And that judge fails to take action, now you got him on misprison or a felony because witness intimidation tampering is absolutely a felony in all jurisdictions, state and federal. So if you're being threatened by the opposing party's counsel, right, directly or indirectly, remember, you don't have to hear it directly from the prosecutor or the U.S. attorney. It can come to your attorney because it's being relayed. Intimidation, witness intimidation tampering is any direct or indirect intimidation, right? So when the prosecutor, through your defense attorney, threatens you and says, well, if you tell him if he doesn't plead guilty, I'm going to give him these other charges, guess what, man? That's a threat. It's an abuse of your power. It's compelling a result through use of threats or intimidation, bringing about the person to act as a witness against themselves through the use of threats or intimidation. The contract formed is illegal, void, wholly without force or effect, because you cannot use duress to formulate a contract. And so, another interesting thing is that when I was talking with people this morning, we were discussing the slavery institution. And here in America, Thomas Jefferson said that slavery cannot come by way of contract. Slavery cannot come by way of contract. So you can't enslave someone through the use of a contract, right? Okay, that makes sense, all right. But then Title 18, subsection 4083 says that you cannot be sent to prison without your consent. You have to consent to go to prison. You have to agree to do it, right? Now, consent is an interesting term because consent is a contractual term, meaning that if you consent, you're entering into a contract. So no person can be sent to prison in America without a contract. Okay, so you're contracted, and we also know 13th Amendment, prison is nothing more than an institution where you are enslaved and forced into involuntary servitude, because our law states that a prisoner and a slave mean the same thing. 13th Amendment says You cannot enslave someone unless it's a punishment for crime, right? But if you make them into a criminal, now you can enslave them, force them into involuntary servitude. So what that did is it creates criminal, slave to mean the same thing. A criminal is a slave is a criminal. So if that's true, and you can't be sent to prison or you can't be a criminal, convicted of a criminal, without a contract, without consent, then you are in fact being enslaved as a result of a contract. And that was expressly foreclosed upon by our own founders. You can't give up something that God gave you. That was something God gave you, so you can't give it up. So the plea bargains, simple argument, but they need to be addressed because 99% of all convictions come by way of plea bargain. That's 99% of all criminal defendants that don't even get to tell the side of the story, and that is an egregious failure of the justice system. Because not only are they not permitted to be able to confront the hearsay accusations against them, because the state has already chosen to take a side, and thus they're going to suppress the words from the other side, because the other side would be detrimental to the side that they took. Then you weren't given the permission, you weren't given the ability to confront the hearsay accusations against you before you were treated as though you're guilty, and now they're threatening, intimidating, forcing you into this institution, and they're going to hold you there until you agree that you're guilty, and thus, give up the trial by jury. But once again, you guys, just because you gave it up doesn't mean that it's lawful or valid. People are going to argue and they're going to say, oh yeah, you have the right to contract. You do have the right to contract. You're damn right you do. But you don't have the right to breach your contract to negotiate a contract with the people. Because the contract of the judge, the contract of the prosecutor, and the contract of the state exists long before you can come in and negotiate. They have to breach their contract of ensuring that your rights are provided in order to negotiate a contract to take away your rights. So yes, you have the right to negotiate a contract. You have a right to, but they don't have the right to breach their contract that existed before they come and try to negotiate a contract with you. That's why rights always drive criminals to the act. If I have the right to indict by a grand jury, it's because the government has the duty to ensure that right is provided. So if government wants to negotiate with me, giving up one of my rights, they would have to breach the obligation that existed before my right can be violated. Thus, government must break the law in order to even negotiate a contract with me, right? So yes, you do have the right to negotiate, but not with government. Government's obligations are set in stone. And that's why we have to take a very, very strong-nosed approach to this issue, is because the law is what it is. It is what it is. And you're either operating within its parameters or you're not. There's no gray area in the law, right? And yet that's where we're at today. They say, well, yeah, but if we don't do it this way, then, whatever. They're taking away the rights little by little, I mean, the other day there was someone that made a video about my issue on the grand jury. Yeah, you gotta have a grand jury before you can arrest someone. If you arrest someone and hold them over without first having a fair and neutral proceeding with a fair and neutral decision maker to allow that person to confront the hearsay evidence that's against them, then you just acted unconstitutionally. And there's no instances whatsoever that would not be unconstitutional. Well, this person made a video and said, "Oh, that can't be because the state has to be able to arrest you if they think you're." That's not true. It's actually not true, because the law doesn't have gray area, and you can't justify the behavior and say, oh yes, well, they can hold you over for 10 days, because that still is illegal. The law is what it is. It's black and white. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on presentment or indictment of a grand jury. Nowhere in that does it permit you to be held for 10 days at the police's discretion. Nowhere in that does it say, oh yes, but these crimes over here, these bad, we can't do it there. No, it doesn't say it. It's black and white. So what we have to do is we have to take that hard-nosed approach. It's something known as Duralex Sedlex. The law is hard, but it's the law. So we can't compromise the law, because if we do, then we're going to give up certain rights. We're going to allow them to take them away bit by bit. You see, civil rights are civil rights because they must apply equally to every single person in our society. Every single person. That's why Thomas Jefferson said that we gain civil rights as a result of choosing to protect and defend the rights of others. See, anybody can go out and fight for their own rights. That's just a matter of life, right? But it takes a real strong person or people to stand up for the rights for others, because it doesn't really have anything to do with them. What it has to do with is that all these people, how can I claim to be free if all these people around me are not free? Right? How can I claim that I have the right to, have my children if all these people around me don't have the right to have their children? That's why we must stand up and protect and defend the rights of others, and that's the only way that we ourselves will gain the rights that we want. So, any chains that we place on another human being, we ourselves or someone we love is someday going to wear those chains. Because any right that can be removed from one person can be removed from all persons, and is no longer right, but simply an illusion of a right. You can't say that this is a civil right and then say, oh yes, but we're going to take it away from this part of society. Dura lex sed lex. It may be hard, but it's the law. The law must apply equally to every single person, period. So when we say, yes, well, we could take away the right to vote for these people over here, we just created oppressive law. Because oppression is the creation of laws that affect one part of society and not another. I don't care what they did. I don't care who they are. That's a person, and the person is guaranteed the right by the Constitution. That's the purpose of the fucking Constitution. So if we say, yes, but we can take away from these people, that's an oppressive law. Because the laws can't apply unequally amongst members of society. You cannot say, oh, we're gonna give this civil right and protect it for all these people here, but not these people here. That's not how constitutionalism works, guys. That's not how egalitarianism works. So we have to take this very, very hard-nosed approach, and we have to say, you know what? No, we're not going to give you an inch. We're not going to negotiate shit. You're not going to come here. We're not going to compromise. You guys are either going to obey the law or you're going to be criminals, right? Because if it says that you can't be held to answer for a capital offense crime unless a presentment by deputy grand jury, that means that you can't do it in any instance. You're not going to say, oh, well, we can do it for this or we can do it for that. No, you're not going to do it at all, right? Because you're either going to obey the law or you're not. We're not going to inch it out. Same thing with children, right? If the Constitution under Amendment 1, incorporated by the Supreme Court in 1984, says that you have the right to have a relationship with your child without governmental interference, then the problem there would be that there's no instance whatsoever that government would be able to interfere with your relationship with your child. None, because that would be a breach of the constitutional protection. Now, I would agree that there's probably instances in which we would want to, take a child, but until the law says it, it is what it is. You can't do it. State, you cannot create a law that abridges the Constitution because that would be deprivation of rights under common law. If you want to change the Constitution, then it has to be changed for all. Otherwise, it's oppression. And when a person such as a prosecutor or judge enforces that law, that's a tyrant. Because they're applying the law unequally amongst members of society by a person in a position of authority. That's what tyranny is. So I would agree that there's probably instances that we would want to discuss, removing a child for their safety. But until we discuss it and put it in law, it cannot be done. Cannot be done. And yet that's where we're at, right? These states are like, well, yeah, but we got to do it in these instances. No, state, you're fucking justifying your criminal behavior so that you don't have to deal with your criminal acts. So you don't have to deal with it because you're too heavily invested in it. We're not gonna accept that, right? You're not gonna tell us that we have to do this because look at what's already. No, you did this, government. You caused this. This is your fault. That people are not gonna continue to suffer because guess what, man? The people were protected by the Constitution that you guys chose to make into a weapon against the people because you want to profit and have a business and enslave people. There's no instance whatsoever that any state could create a law that permits the state to take away your children. The reason why, you guys, is because the Constitution is the federal law. That federal law exists outside of the limited or statutory governing limits of a state. State is within the federal government. So the state is located within the Constitution. Therefore, the state has no authority to be able to change what is outside of its limited governing limits. The Constitution cannot be changed by a state because the state is created by the Constitution. States didn't exist before. States gave up their union to subject themselves to. So the moment union was created, the Constitution created the union. Thus, the states were created by the Constitution. That which is created cannot be above the Creator. So you cannot say that the states have the authority to be able to take away, abridge, or destroy any of the guarantees of the Constitution. That is actually our first question to the court. Do states have the right to be able to enact their own legislation substituted for the guarantees of the Constitution of the United States of America? The answer is no, they can't. And that's upheld in a lot of places, including Constitutional Law 171, that says that state courts and federal courts are equally obligated to guard and enforce every right secured by the Constitution. States must guard and enforce every right secured by the Constitution. But the reason why the states can't do it is because if the federal laws, the federal rights reside outside of the state's governing limits, then when the state comes in and abridges those through a law, through ruling, through, criminal acts, whatever, when they do that, that's a federal issue. And a federal issue must go to a federal court because a state court can't take away a federal issue. It's outside of their limited statutory governing limits. If they could, then that would mean that the lower courts are more powerful than the higher courts. And if that's true, then Supreme Court needs to let us know that. If the Supreme Court is not the Supreme Court, if they don't have the power to direct all of their agents, all the state courts to obey the law and the very laws that they must obey, then I would say, tell the people that. Let them know that. And then go turn off your lights and go home because you're fucking done. You're just a bunch of bullshit that has no power. That's why Abraham Lincoln said, it has long been a grave question whether any government not too strong for the liberties of its people can be strong enough to maintain its own existence in great emergencies. This government was designed to have just enough power to preserve the liberties, but at the same time not have so much power that it could overcome the people. And that's been the question. Is it going to work? I don't know. But what I can say is once again, there's 2.9 million prisoners here in America. Those prisoners are all people. They were originally people before any of their rights were violated. And if their rights were violated when they were a person, right, then that means that they're still a person today. So when you say that these people, that you can take away their rights, I'm going to say no. I have 2.9 million people standing behind me that were protected by the Constitution of the United States of America, right, protected by law. They may not be good people. They may not be innocent people, but they're not guilty people. Standing in front of me is the Supreme Court of the United States. And behind them are 40,000 criminals who have broken the law in order to put all these people in an institution through their criminal acts. So 2.9 million people that are being held in an institution because of criminal acts committed by 40,000 people on the other side. Tell me who's going to win this issue. It's not going to be them, because if we can bring this to the attention of the American people, if we can have an opportunity for me to be able to explain to people that people are not going to stand on the side of criminals. They're going to stand on the side of the people. They're going to say, you know what? They did have rights. Here it is. It says it right there. Judges. And so our fight is not against the judges. It's not. That's why we're not fighting in their battlefield. That's why we have to fight in the opinion of the public, because the only reason why these judges are committing crimes they commit and doing things they do is because the people are permitting them to do it. So the people have to make them stop. And the only way we can get them to stop from the people is the people must be made aware. That's why Dr. King knew when he was dealing with Plessy versus Ferguson, he knew that segregation was wrong. He knew why it was wrong, but he knew if he could just get the country talking about the issue, that would be all that would be necessary to overcome that issue. If we can get the people talking about this issue, we're done. We will win. We will overcome that issue very, very quickly. Because the issue isn't, should we let 2.9 million criminals go? The issue is, does government have the right to be able to break the law? Does government have the right to be able to disregard the one thing that's created in order to establish them? That's the question. This isn't about prisoners. This is about the government. It's always been about the government. From the very beginning, does government have the right to be able to force upon us a different set of faith and belief? No. Our faith is in the Constitution. Government, you can't tell us that we have to believe in something different. You can't tell us that we have to believe in your lies told by your judges who had no authority to create law, because we didn't delegate the authority to create law to them. 10th Amendment. Rights not delegated, or duties not, obligations not delegated or reserved by states are maintained by the people. We did not delegate the right to create the law to the judicial branch. That was reserved by the people through the legislative branch, Article 1. All power to create law is vested in the people of the United States. Judges don't get to create law. We never delegated that authority. And as a result, when a judge creates a ruling and erroneously calls it law and then directs the whole country to follow what they said it was law, well, that's not lawful. That is not law, because judges don't create law. And as a result, what they created, what they told all the whole country that they can follow, and led all these states astray and permitted states to create their own laws, that none is valid. See, the Supreme Court of the United States is the problem, because until the Supreme Court of the United States steps up and and corrects the unlawful acts of its institution, the criminal acts committed by their supposedly honorable predecessors that we know are despicable, until they step up and correct the unlawful acts and the unlawful laws that were created by them, then by the fraud that was introduced in 1833 by that highest court in land that directed all the courts within the purview of the United States that they don't have to follow the Constitution, until this court steps up and corrects that and puts into place the correct action by removing the fraud. Fraud is fatal to any action. It's fatal to any action. Once fraud is introduced by the highest court in land, every court in land is committing the same fraudulent acts by direction of the highest court in land. So that highest court in land must come out and they must correct that unlawful behavior, direct all the courts within the purview of the United States that they must follow the Constitution in its entirety. And if they don't, then nothing that they do is going to be valid. Nothing that any court in the country is going to do is valid because the fraud that was committed and introduced by the highest court in land. The reason why these state courts are breaking the law and doing things they do is because that fucking court permits them to do it. That court's responsible for it. Every bit of it. So our fight isn't with the state courts. Our fight isn't with the state judges. They're only following their leaders, right? We got to hold the leaders accountable. You go to mom and dad and say, Mom and Dad, why did you teach that child how to be abusive, right? Right? Supreme Court, why are you telling all these courts that they don't have to obey the law? Because you chose to not obey the law. So either one, they are what they say that they are, and they are the Supreme Court, and they do support and defend the supreme law of the land, and they do want to preserve America because they want to have an Article 3, institution. They want to maintain their power. Either they do step up and they assert their supremacy and they direct all the states to act consistent with what they themselves must obey, or they're nothing. You don't have the supremacy. You are going to delegate your authority, your power to the state courts. You're going to make them more powerful than you, and that means that there is no more Article 3. Doesn't exist anymore. You guys' position doesn't exist anymore. The power you think you had doesn't exist because you guys don't have the honor or the courage or integrity to actually step up and do your job and make your agents obey the law. That's the Gorsuch issue. If Gorsuch is going to go around the country having press conferences and writing a book and saying that all these judges are committing crimes, I'm going to say to you, Gorsuch, you know what? Why aren't you doing something about it then? Those are just words, man. Your words and your actions have to align. If you're going to say that your agents are committing crimes, but you're going to not do anything about the criminal acts that they're committing, you're just going to ignore it, then I'm going to say to you, you know what? You're not what you say you are. You don't believe that. And the same thing can be said about Ms. Brown. Because Ms. Brown, she's the only criminal defense attorney to have ever been on the court. None of the other justices that have ever been on the Supreme Court have ever been criminal defense attorneys, right? She's the only one. She knows that this system is unjust. She knows it. And she's made statements to the extent in some of her dissensions. Last year, she wrote in one of her dissensions that she's tired of the court's no-see-em doctrine with regard to considering the innocence of prisoners. Yeah, I think that 2.9 million people are pretty sick of your doctrine of not considering, their cases. I think that there's 10 million people that are kind of sick of you not considering their cases because you're just simply, controlling and hindering free speech to control the narrative through the use of threats or intimidation. I mean, yeah, we're all sick of the no-see-em doctrine that exists with regard to this court, considering the guilt of their agents. We're all pretty sick of that. That would be the correlation to what Justice Brown said. If she's tired of the no-see-em doctrine with regard to considering the innocence of prisoners, then I'm going to say that, okay, so why don't you fucking consider the innocence of prisoners then? Why don't you put us on the docket, right? Why don't you listen to all, because I'll tell you what, there's probably hundreds of thousands of cases that are ready to go to the Supreme Court that would love to go there to consider the innocence of prisoners. So if you say that you're tired of the no-see-em doctrine, then you have the power to correct that. Any one of these justices have the power to step up and to correct the unlawful acts of the institution. They do. Because when a judicial edict comes out, when a writ of habeas corpus is issued, one justice can sign a writ of habeas corpus. And a writ of habeas corpus can correct and provide judicial notice and correction to an unlawful act committed by the states. So, Ms. Brown, if you don't like how the states are acting, then issue a habeas. declaring that the states are depriving of fundamental rights and make them have to obey those fundamental rights. Don't just say it, do it, be about it. Because if you are the leader of the court and you say that you don't like how the court's acting, then fucking correct the court then, man. You know, leaders lead by action, they don't lead by words. Words don't inspire, action inspires. When George Washington got on his horse and he rode out in front of the army and he led the army into battle and he had 11 horses shot out from underneath him, that inspired people. That was leadership, right? People followed that. They don't just follow your words. So, Gorsuch, if you're just going to write about a book and say, yes, they're threatening, intimidating people, and not recognize the fact that that's a crime, it's illegal, and what they're doing is completely void, and that 99% of the people in prison are there on contracts that were formulated through the use of threats or intimidation by your agents, I'm going to say that maybe you don't believe in that. Maybe it's just words. Maybe you're just, talking out your ass. I don't know, but at the end of the day, you have admitted a crime. Because the Constitution says no person shall be compelled in any criminal case to act as a witness against themselves. So if you get a person to act as a witness against themselves through the use of threats or intimidation, you just broke the law. And that's every single prosecutor and every single judge and probably almost every single law enforcement officer across this entire country has done that, right? They arrest you and they put you into jail, despite the fact that they don't have evidence or asked you your side of the story. That is a use of threats or intimidation in order to get you to act as a witness against yourself, and that can't be done in any criminal case. Otherwise, they broke the law. And if government breaks the law, what they produce is unlawful. So all that I'm doing for all of us, I'm bringing everybody in the same procedural situation. I want everybody, I want to be able to litigate this in a mass scale. I can't come out to the states and help all of you. You guys need help. I know you do. And I would love to help you. And I am helping you. But the way that I help you is we're bringing together as many people as possible so that I can litigate this in one single swoop, right? So I had to find the place in which the first crime was committed by government. I thought it was plea bargains, right? I thought that that's where the issue was. And plea bargain is a major issue. But that plea bargain is long after the arrest. You are arrested. The moment you're arrested, certain things were supposed to be in place. You had to have an indictment by grand jury. There wasn't one, right? You were charged by information, felony information. So you're charged by information in violation of the Constitution. Crime, right? If you break the Constitution, you're breaking the law. Constitution is the law. And if the Constitution is the law that's against the people of the United States, or the public officials, then when they don't obey the Constitution, they broke the law. So that's the point of the original offense. And so instead of focusing on the plea bargain, saying, oh, well, I had the right to testify and I didn't get to, we go to the first point. We find the first crime committed and we pull as many people as together into that particular procedural situation. Because we're going to have a class action habeas, which we've already asked for. We've already asked for a class action device to be applied to this case under Rule 23 of USCIS Rules of Civil Procedure. The Supreme Court will class this together. It will. But we have to bring together a massive class that are in the same procedural situation. So these affidavits, they can't be changed. You can't add to them. You don't put additional information in. You are going to fill out the information exactly the way that it says to be filled out. 22 pieces of information. You don't need to talk about anything else. You guys, you want to talk about, about what they did to you, or about how they beat you, or how they lied about you, or bias and judge. You want to talk about those things? Great. You're not going to be part of this procedural situation. Because this procedural situation is they didn't have authority to arrest you because they broke the Constitution in order to do it. They did not have documentation. That's all we're talking about. You want to talk about something else, then you're going to need to go build your own case. You're going to need to bring that forward, and you're going to need to argue that. But we are arguing that your arrest was unconstitutional because I can bring in a massive number of people, almost 70 million people I can bring together in that one procedural situation. And it doesn't matter what state they're in, they're using the exact same formula, right? So I brought together the formula. I brought together the formula by identifying the exact moment that the first crime was committed by government, and then I bring everybody in the same procedural situation so that if one person overcomes that procedural situation, all persons overcome that procedural situation. That's the way that a class action habeas works. So again, this affidavit, you guys aren't going to win out at the states. You're right. But the states are not going to obey the law until their master teaches them how to obey the law. My kids aren't going to be peaceful unless I teach them how to be peaceful, right? So if the leadership of the judges is the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is refusing to obey the law, then they're simply leading their judges in that direction. We can't fight the child when we need to deal with the parent. We have to go to the Supreme Court. You guys have to follow me there. You have to give me permission to advocate for you, to litigate this on your behalf. And if I can successfully litigate this against the state of Washington, then through that win, we will provide relief to all of the states and all the persons across the country that's in the same procedural situation, because we're classing you together. That's what the affidavits are about, right? This is a direct blow. It's going to be a brute force attack on the Supreme Court, because we're going to come in there with 500,000 criminal affidavits of actual crimes, actual victims, of these offenses that's being committed by their agents across the country. And we're going to say, these people work for you. And if you don't want to take action to correct their unlawful behavior, then you guys just became criminals, misprision and treason, because you know about it and you're permitting it to continue. 500,000 of these, right? And these aren't criminal complaints, because criminal complaints actually initiate the criminal proceedings. We could totally hold these judges accountable. We could try them and hang them, and we could do all that, but that would be the next step. I'm simply bringing to them a weapon and saying, here's a shot across your bow. We can either address this now, and you can let me litigate this. You can let me debate this, or we're going to take these and we're going to bring in trial, because we can do that, right? We have the authority to do that. It's up to them. See, they don't get to make the decision here. We're going to bring to them an opportunity for them to peacefully resolve this issue. Direct your fucking agents to obey the law, because you obey the law, and fix what you guys have been broken. Fix it all, right? Let our people go, right? Let our people go. Do what you're supposed to do, government, and that's to preserve the life, liberty, environment, find happiness for our people. Do your job. Stop oppressing them. Stop stealing from them. Do your fucking job. If you can't do your job, then we will reclaim our government. We'll take it back, because that's what happens with the destruction of a democracy, right? We're not a democracy, but we morphed into it. So we have the right to reclaim our original liberties and take back our freedom, if those that are leading us are refusing to guarantee our freedom. So even God says that you have the right to be able to defend yourself, right? And so if God gave you the right to life, and someone's trying to take your life from you, you have the right to defend yourself. That's what self-defense is. You're justified in your actions. So if our government is refusing to give us and permit us to live our lives and become the people we want, right, then by that treasonous act, the fruit that they ate is most certainly going to be punished by death. That's why Scripture says that, if you eat the fruit of that tree, you'll most certainly die. Yes, public officials, when you eat the fruit of treason, the punishment is death, as prescribed by law. And the people are justified in their actions to do whatever's necessary to defend their freedom, because we have the right to be free, because we have the obligation to defend that freedom. If we breach our obligation of defending freedom, then by failing to fight for everyone's freedom, then we will have given up our right to be free. So we don't want to give up our right to be free, but the way we fight to preserve it is by defending the rights of others. You can't take away anyone's rights. No one's. You can't take away anyone's gun's rights, because if you could, then we create an oppressive law. The Constitution is not oppressive. What the states do is oppressive. Constitution says everyone's got it. Everyone. You can't say everyone except for that person. Everyone except for these people. Everyone except for there. Because that's not egalitarianism. That is not constitutional. That is inconsistent with the system of government that we created. There is no instance in which the law can be broken by a state, because that would mean the state laws are more powerful than the federal law. If the state constitutions are supreme to the United States Constitution, then what's the purpose of the United States Constitution? To what purpose did we create this government? And to what reason did we reduce this government's laws to writing, if those that are bound to adhere to them are able to abridge them based upon their own inferior legislation? that would defeat the purpose of the Constitution, that would defeat the purpose of the Union, and that would destroy everything we believe we have, and it would put us back into a state of confederacy where the states are able to govern the people however they see fit because they have the sovereignty to do so. We would have a complete disjointing, breakdown, and destruction of the nation if we do not fix this problem. States do not have sovereignty. States do not have the authority to create their own laws. They do not have the authority to enforce those laws in violation of the Constitution of the United States of America, which means that every single one of us has the right and the duty to defend the Constitution against those that are abridging it, because if we don't, then by our failure to defend the Constitution, we will have given up our right to be free under the Constitution. If you want to claim your rights in the Constitution, then you must stand up and defend the Constitution. Because if you don't, the Constitution is nothing. And if the Constitution is nothing, then that Supreme Court's nothing. The United States Congress is nothing, right? That president is nothing. DC is nothing, because they only exist because of that Constitution. No other reason. So we can get rid of a whole bunch of government bullshit, the bureaucracy, if it's not real. And I would just assume, if it's not real, then fine. It's not real then. If that's what the people want, if they don't want the union, if they want 50 regional governments that are all autonomous, doing whatever they want to do, if that's the world we want to live in, not a world where there's America, but where there's the American Union, right, of 50 autonomous states, and we no longer want to be able to cross from one state to another because of, because we have to have passport. They can create their money. They can have their own standing army. If we want those things, great. Shut down DC. Let's save ourselves the money and let's save ourselves the trouble of believing something isn't real. Let's give up on the union and the only thing that makes the union, and let's live in a world that was the same as 1776 or 1776 when we had a political system of government known as a confederacy. We'll go back to that. We'll just destroy the union, and all these lives that have been lost and all these battles, these brave American warriors, we'll just go ahead and let them die, in vain, because we didn't believe in ourselves. We didn't believe in what we were fighting for. That's not what the American people are going to do, right? That's what those judges are pushing. That's the narrative they're pushing, even though they wouldn't use those words. That's what they're pushing, because then they claim that states are sovereign. When they say, "Oh, well, we don't get involved with states' rights," states don't have rights, man. You have duties, and that is to preserve the nation and make sure the states are complying with the Constitution of the United States and the laws of the United States, because they are the supreme law of the land. And if you don't step up and do that, congressman or senator or justice, if you don't do that, then you guys don't have an existence anymore. You're nothing. There is no need for senators and congressmen if there is no central government. There's no need for senators and congressmen if there's no Constitution. There's no need for a Supreme Court if there's not a Constitution. Shut this shit down and let's fucking go home. They have to step up, and they have to fix this, okay? They have to. Because if they don't, then they will have given up their power, they will have given up their institution, and they will have destroyed America. So the decision is on them. All that I can do, I cannot keep any one of them from exercising their power. But what I can do is I can show them that should they choose to exercise their power without authority, that is going to make you a criminal. So I am simply drawing a line in the sand. Been doing it from the very beginning. And I've been showing them this is what the law states. You guys are clearly operating outside of that law. Clearly. And as a result, your actions are unlawful. And according to even scripture, anytime you have unlawfulness, it cannot produce guilt. Because guilt must be done lawfully. So these people that are out here, these criminals, these terrible, awful people that we say need to be locked up and imprisoned and enslaved and forced into involuntary servitude, we're going to say we don't know what type of person that is because the state didn't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. But what we can say is that where they're at right now, they're being held there without any lawful authority whatsoever. None. Those people in prison, those 2.9 million people currently sitting there, not one of them can be held there. Not one of them. They're all being put there through criminal acts by people that are slave traders. They're profiting off their illegal acts. And when these 2.9 million people wake up and realize that, what the fuck am I still doing here? Why am I still working for this institution for free? There's not even anything holding me here. When they wake up and they decide, you know what? there's only 100 guards standing in front of me. What the fuck? Why am I not walking out here? And those 100 guards, I'm going to tell you, one of the things that we're going to be pushing now is we're going to be pushing the knowledge that guards, if any one of these people try to walk out of there, I would step to side and let them fucking walk. Don't do a thing. Because if these DOC officers, if they attempt to use force against someone that has the lawful authority to get away because they're being kidnapped by an unlawful judgment created by a judicial officer, and you take action, then by your failure or your abuse of power by relying upon a judge's, illegal and unlawful edict, what you are enforcing here, officer, is not valid. If you do anything, you'll be committing murder. And you know what? One of these days, these prisoners are going to wake up and they're going to realize that they're not being held there by anything. There are no judgments because those judgments were created by criminals through a criminal act. And when DOC wakes up and says, you know what? He's right. All of these judgments are void and we've been enforcing void judgments because we didn't question it. Then they're going to also realize that it would be an abuse of power for them to attempt to stop these prisoners from stepping up and saying, I'm no longer going to be enslaved. Because duress is a justifiable defense for a crime, a breach of contract, or a tort. If you use duress to formulate a contract, that contract is fully breachable. So 2.9 million people are sitting on contracts that enslaved them because threats and intimidation was used to formulate them, which means that they could breach these contracts anytime and not be held accountable for the breach of contract. There's nothing keeping them in these institutions other than the fear that's being inflicted by a whole bunch of criminals, 40,000 of them, who's employing these minions over here and then putting these minions in a position where they're committing crimes because they're just ignorant, right? They don't understand that they have no authority to hold those people there, right? Because the authority they thought they had, they were relying upon a fucking criminal who made him. The American people could wake up to this, and they could wake up to it. And all I got to say here is that, once again, I am not advocating for dangerous people to get out. I'm not doing it. But what I'm saying is that the issue at hand is there's only two options here. We cannot keep people enslaved and imprisoned on judgments in a system that says that it's based upon government laws. If you broke the law to secure that conviction is void. It's not real. It doesn't exist. And so we can't pick and choose who's going to stay guilty and who's not. It's just going to be an all or nothing deal, right? And that makes it a pretty big deal, right? People would say, oh, this is impossible. But I got to say to you that what is more impossible, right? And what is less risky? Is it an appeal with an attorney? The very people that put you in there has no clue what they're doing, right? It doesn't talk to you and only has about a 2% chance of winning. And they're going to charge you personally $50,000 to lose. Is that the least risky path? Or is it this guy over here that says, you know what, fuck their judgment, fuck their appeal, there's nothing to appeal, judgment doesn't even exist. Let's go to the beginning and let's talk about their crime. And by the way, I'm not asking you guys for money. I'm working for all of you because we're going to do this all at once together, one single shot, and we're going to get it done. And guess what? The law even backs us up here. So I'm telling you to do the opposite of what the attorneys do. They're telling you to go over here. I'm telling you don't do that anymore. We've done that a million times, over and over and over again, expecting a different result. Don't listen to them. They're the ones that put you there. Listen to the beginning and say, you know what? Is the Constitution of the United States what it says it is? Does it have the power that it says that it does? Can we believe and have faith in the words that it says? And if we can, if we believe in its supremacy, if we rely upon it and we speak its words and we don't listen to what fucking attorneys tell us to do, forget the appeal. Go to the beginning. Your arrest was unconstitutional because it derives from an unconstitutional act. They didn't have the proper documentation in place prior to arresting you, and as a result, that arrest is unconstitutional, meaning that everything that happens after that is unconstitutional. There is no judgment because the arrest was a criminal act. It derives from a breach of constitutional obligation. You go to the beginning and you start there. Accuse them of the crimes they're committing against you, right? Go on offense. Don't defend yourself anymore because there's nothing to defend. That judgment isn't valid because if you show that they didn't have the authority to arrest you, the rest is unconstitutional. Nothing more to talk about. Don't worry about that. Go on offense, accuse them of crime, and ignore what they tell you to address. Ignore it. There's nothing else to talk about here. There's nothing to arbitrate because you committed a crime. I'm going to talk about it. We're going to point to that, okay? And that's why we can get the most people together on that one issue. That's why Thomas Jefferson said, we gain civil rights as a result of choosing to protect and defend the rights of others. Every one of you that has loved ones, every one of you that's in prison, everyone whose spouse is in prison, all of you can talk about the first issue. Government didn't have authority to arrest them because they didn't have the proper documentation in place to do it. Absence of the grand jury. That police officer did not have the authority to be able to determine probable cause because the probable cause has to be determined by the people, right? That prosecutor doesn't have the right to be able to create a bill against you because the bill must be created by the people, right? That judge doesn't have authority to create the law because the law must be created by the people. All of that is gone. That's why I said, all we got to do is go to their criminal acts that was committed against you, and when you do that, the judgments are automatically gone. You can collaterally attack the judgment if you want. You can spend $50,000 on some asshole that's going to have a 2% chance of winning, or we can say, you know what? We can get a lot of people talking about this one. We get 70 million people talking about this issue right here. And when 70 million people talk about one issue instead of all these other, we get a massive amount of attention on that. So power is not gun or badge or title. Power is the ability to influence others in their future decisions. Power comes from your words. So if we get a massive number of people talking about this issue, it will never be dark again. We will light it up, and by lighting it up, now we will say this is where the problem originates. All crime starts from government. Their crimes are producing the crimes because they're taking people that are hurting and not helping them, and instead hurting them even more because their business model is designed to do so, because that is what they profit off of through their illegal acts. You guys want to be on offense because when you're on defense and you're defending yourself, when you permit these attorneys to tell you to spend $50,000 on them, you're wasting it. I would say that the less risky option is to put your faith in the Constitution, especially if that less risky option doesn't even cost you anything, right? Because I can litigate this on behalf of millions of people, millions of them, right? All these prisoners that are in prison, they don't have money, guys. I knew that they didn't have money. That's why I chose to do this for free, because someone had to help them. They needed the help, and no one else was willing to do it because it was all about money. Well, remember, I couldn't have found my passion, because this is my passion. They say that you found your passion when you choose to do something even when there is no money because you love it so much. This is my passion. I love this, right? I love justice. I love fighting for all of you because this is what I'll do even when there's no money in it, right? Once again, I have $11 in my account, but I do this because I love it, and that means that's my passion. But when you take your passion and you give it to others, that becomes your purpose. This is my purpose. I'm here for this purpose. I've been trained for this purpose, and I chose to do this because those people needed help, and they don't have money. And all these attorneys say, oh, well, we need your money, or we're not going to help you. So, but in order for me to help them, I needed to find the way to do it that would allow me to live part of my life once again when it's done. Because this is not the life that I want to be. A normal person. I want to have a wife once again. I want to have kids around. I want to have a house. I want those things, but I can't have them with my purpose, right? I can't have them with my passion, because if I were relying upon a house, if that were what I were working for, then justice wouldn't be my passion. So I don't care about money, because I'm going to give those things up right now. I'm going to sacrifice those things that I would want so that I can remain passionate, so I can keep this, because this isn't conducive with what I would want. This is conducive with what they need. So they need help, and no one's able to help them because they don't have money. And that's why you guys' donations are so important, because you might think that you're giving money, but the money you give is for those people that are too poor to give anything on their own. You guys are donating for them. But even still, if there's one person, me, working on behalf of 70 million people, and I could litigate a case that one argument could effectively, free them and restore the original liberties for them, then that seems a lot more effective than 50 million attorneys across the country all saying, pay me $50,000 and all collaterally attack the judgment that's in place when they're not even smart enough to understand that that judgment isn't even real. What I'm saying is inconsistent with what they would want. You're not going to hear these things. You're not going to hear these things from attorneys. They're not going to do this. They're not going to come up with this solution because this has a major impact on their business. They're not going to be driving around in Bentleys anymore, charging $50,000 for no work at all, but you're going to lose anyway because that's the business model they put together. It's not the business model that I have, right? This system has got to go. Tear it down. I was talking with an advocacy group this morning, and I was explaining to them the problem with a lot of these advocacy groups out there is that they're building an organization within the parameters of the existing system. So if the existing system is built upon all these fallacies and operates it properly, then if I come in and I say, okay, I'm gonna do appeals and I'm gonna build a business around appealing, right? Then I may believe in justice reform. I may say that I want justice reform, but I've now built my business and within the parameters of the system. Therefore, my health and well-being is dependent upon the system, and I will become blind to the true reality of what needs to be done to fix it. Because you can't preserve any of it. Because if it's wrong, it's wrong. So all these advocacy groups that's coming in and they're finding some table scraps within the existing system. They're content with those table scraps. I'm going to say that now you don't have the ability to look at this objectively because now you're relying upon that for your existence.